And every day we get more and more evidence that Trump's agenda is losing Republican support outside of the MAGA base. Trump angered members of his own party by mishandling the release of the Epstein files, an issue Trump blundered so badly that a majority of Republicans now say they think this government is hiding something. Look at those numbers. Trump launched a disastrous war in Iran, a war that is so unpopular that only 46% of Republicans think the operation has been successful. Trump's war drove up gas prices so fast and so high that even a majority of Republicans now say Trump is to blame. Trump is insistent on punishing Republicans who cross him because he knows that if he doesn't, they will have every incentive to turn on him in order to save themselves. Let's not forget that the entire reason today's contested primary is even happening is because Trump is scared of losing the midterms. So scared that he demanded Republicans rig their maps to engineer their victory. Here was former Transportation Secretary and Indiana native Pete Buttigieg on that very point at a rally in Indianapolis just last year.
We are here because Indiana Republicans are being pressured by Washington Republicans to do something that they know in their hearts is wrong. They are being pressured to change the rules so that voters don't have a say anymore, and they know that that is wrong. And we know why they're doing it, which is because the agenda of Washington Republicans is so unpopular that even here in Indiana, they're afraid of losing if they have to run on a fair map.
That was back in September. And joining me now is former Transportation Secretary and former Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. I mean, it is, first of all, it's great to see you. You are from Indiana. It's great to see you. I just played that clip of you calling out what the Trump administration was up to way back in September. This has been going on that long. I think it's important for people to remember. And now 5 Trump-backed candidates have now won their races. One incumbent has hung on. One is still in the air. I wonder what you make of the results tonight. And more importantly, I wonder how you think about the significance of really what we've seen over the last several months in Indiana.
Well, it was striking to see just how much money the Republican Party had to put into Indiana, millions and millions of dollars, against Republicans just to police the boundaries of their own coalition, because a number of them blew off President Trump and blew off J.D. Vance for the reasons that as we described in that rally, had to do with them knowing that they were being pressured to do something wrong. I think the biggest difference between what it felt like back in September and now is that it's not just a series of unpopular policies. That's been true the whole time. Most Americans disagree with the Republican agenda in Congress of cutting taxes for the wealthy and cutting services for the rest of us. But what's really mounted now is how much the results are also failing. We've lived with the price of the tariffs, and now we've also lived with the fact that they failed to restore manufacturing jobs in the country. We have now been living with the consequences of this Iran war and living with the increased price in everything from mortgage rates going up to diesel, where I live in Michigan, hitting an all-time high. All is a direct consequence of the White House and congressional Republicans. So, that dynamic continues, and it's why in a season when they should be doing everything they can to beat Democrats, they instead had to deploy millions of dollars just to beat existing Republicans and replace them with other Republicans, all because the president was mad at them.
Yeah, it's like, congratulations on your $12 million you spent to replace some Republicans with other Republicans. Good job when you're at risk of losing the House, the Senate, and gubernatorial seats. Let me ask you something. We have talked before about sort of what politics could be, what we all hope it will be again. I mean, these Republicans in Indiana, you probably don't agree with them on much. I don't agree with them on much in terms of their policies, but they knew what was coming if they stood up to Trump. They stood up to him anyways. They decided, some of them at least, that there are worse things than losing an election. I just wonder how different you think our country and our politics could be if more Republicans had that in them. And do you think, you've been traveling out there in the country, that there are more of them out there?
I do. I mean, I see it everywhere I go. We have been going to a lot of more conservative areas. We did a town hall in Oklahoma. It was great. We had about 2,000 people come out. I was in Marjorie Taylor Greene's old district where we had hundreds of people come out, and the Democratic candidate overperformed by about 25 points. Headed to Montana soon, and there were a lot of people on all sides of the aisle who were fed up with the role of money in politics and taking action to do something about it. So I do believe a different kind of politics is possible. Look, Democrats are always going to disagree with Republicans. I'm always going to disagree on a lot of issues with Republicans. But if we're all actually talking about what we believe in, that is better than Republicans repeatedly having to feel pressure to either lose their career or do something wrong because the president is demanding it of them. And I think what we saw also, and this is a really important thing to think about as we go into the future, is there are a lot of Republicans in office now who are realizing that their political career, even if they do lose an election along the way, is going to last longer than Donald Trump's domination of the Republican Party. They are planning for life after Trump. Democrats need to learn to do the same thing, not only to vigorously oppose what he's doing wrong, as we must, but to make clear our constructive governing agenda for what we will begin to do on that day when he leaves the political scene. And if people feel what we are seeking to do, to lower their health care costs, to lower the cost of groceries, to make sure that you can actually afford to raise a family and buy a home in this country, I think that's how we can build a durable majority in a country where people already largely agree with us on issues from taxes to choice, but where they need to see that we're also prepared to deliver.
Yeah, I think that's a big takeaway from the election in 2024. No question. I mean, tonight, and we're about to talk to Dr. Amy Acton. We're gonna keep talking about politics through the course of the show. But one of the backdrops, and you alluded to this, is certainly the war with Iran, and there are so many impacts on the country. Obviously, the members of the military whose lives have been lost, and gas prices skyrocketing. There are lots of impacts on communities across the country. It's just so rare for a national security issue to be a driver for voters. I wonder, as you're talking to people out there and just your political sense, how much do you think that is a driver right now for people in the country, Democrats, independents, and others who are really deciding where they're going to be in this moment?
Well, the reason I think this is driving so much right now is because the Iran war is affecting Americans' everyday life, and people know it. This is not just a matter of agreeing or disagreeing about some academic question of foreign policy that only affects people in a far-off land. This is something that has come home to us in the most immediate way. We are paying more every day for a war that the American people didn't ask for. You add to that the fact that it's so insulting to Donald Trump's own voters who believed him when he said he would keep us out of wars, and to veterans who have put their lives on the line for this country. And I think that's also a reason why you're seeing a lot of extraordinary results for people who have served. Shedrick Green is performing very well. The numbers are coming in as we speak in Michigan. I had the privilege of campaigning with him, going door to door in Michigan, in the community of Midland. From what we can tell, there's been a dramatic swing toward Democrats in that district. Now, that's for the Michigan State Senate. It's not that people, I think, expect the Michigan State Senate to be voting on matters of war and peace. It's this expectation that we look for leaders who will do right by us, and that includes leaders who've served themselves.
We're going to talk to him at the end of the show. That's quite a tee-up for him as well. So we'll talk to him in a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm betting you have. But the default defense from these guys is in the Trump administration, others 18 months into their administration, seems to be to blame Joe Biden and the Biden administration, from inflation numbers to gas prices to an airline going under. They just want to blame the administration you and I both worked in. I think because they don't want to acknowledge their policies are doing the damage. To me, it's pretty pathetic. But what do you think it tells us about them?
Well, it's an extraordinary show of weakness to see the Trump administration, when you have something like Spirit Airlines, for example, going out of business because of jet fuel prices going through the roof because of the war in Iran, and they've made very clear that that's why that airline went under. To have the Trump administration desperately trying to say, oh, no, this is actually because 3 years ago the Biden administration got involved in an antitrust case involving the airline, when everybody can see that what is happening is a direct consequence of the unnecessary, unpopular, and unsuccessful policies of the Trump administration. Look, when you are this deep into your second year, if your reflex is to still be trying to blame the previous administration, it really shows that you are out of ideas, out of solutions, and unwilling to take ownership of your own choices like this Iran war that has cost so much already in this country and beyond.
You mentioned, and I think this is so important, Democrats have to talk about what they're for and the contrast. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that more and more and more over the last several months. And today we learned that Republicans want to spend $1 billion in taxpayer money to fund Trump's ballroom. Which last I checked was supposed to cost $400 million in private funding, I would note. But my point is every day we get these new headlines about new vanity projects, new ways the president and his family are enriching themselves. How much do you think that should be? Because you got to decide what you talk about right out there. How much do you think that should be a part of the conversation right now?
I think our job is to connect the dots. None of these things happens in isolation. And the reason why it is so infuriating to see this administration make the choices that it's making is that it relates to what's happening every day, right? Every penny of your taxpayer money that the president tries to spend, not on security, to be clear, but on a fancy ballroom to host parties for VIPs in, is related to the dollars they are taking away from your health care. And every minute that they spend on things like the latest news today, renaming the airport in Palm Beach after Donald Trump, is attention and energy that is coming away from things like dealing with very real problems in the aviation sector today in America. So none of these things happens in isolation, but I think our job is to make very clear how everyday life could be better in this country, that it doesn't have to be this way. But that means addressing the corruption, addressing this mismanagement, the self-dealing, and the plain old bad policy coming from this administration and replacing it with an agenda that will put food on the table, that will make healthcare more affordable, that will mean that you can get things like paid leave when you need it to take care of your family, and a fairer tax code that will see to it that a teacher or a nurse or a firefighter in America is not paying, as it is today, a higher tax rate than billionaires. These are things the American people already agree with us on. We just got to make sure we keep the focus squarely on the connections among all these issues.